So I've recently discovered that quilting is actually super fun and not just for grandmas, so when my friend had a baby this summer, I decided it was the perfect excuse to make him a little blanket, but I didn't want to ruin the surprise by asking for the theme of the nursery, so I went just with a red, white, and blue color palette, and I'm hoping that it's giving Ralph Lauren nautical inspiration and not just 4th of July, but I just went with a simple pinwheel design, and then I started out with these 5-inch by 5-inch squares, and I layered 2 on top of each other, drew a line down the center diagonally, and then sewed along either side of that line, and in hindsight, I definitely could have sewed a little bit further away from that line because my seam allowance ended up being super tiny when I cut my squares apart, but then I just opened up my square, pressed my seam allowance to the darker side, and then I made a whole bunch of these in different color combinations with the fabric that I got, and then it was time to lay out my design and figure out where everything went. This honestly was probably the hardest part of this quilt because I didn't want any of the same fabric touching each other, and if I had mapped it out better when I first started, I probably could have avoided this, but I kind of just started sewing and went with it. So there's 1 or 2 squares that are touching the same fabric, but that's okay because it's homemade and I'm learning to appreciate the imperfections along the way. But after I attached all of my little squares to each other, I pressed all the seams flat and then attached those little rectangles to the other rectangles to create this little working block. At this point, it really started to come together, so come back for the last video where I will be quilting and binding this baby blanket.